Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking what is widely considered Plutarch's absolute darkest pairing of historical figures, Alcibiades of Athens and Coriolanus of Rome. We're looking at two truly extraordinary hometown heroes here. I mean, these were men endowed with staggering, once-in-a-generation talent. They served their respective cities brilliantly, only to experience these dramatic, almost unbelievable falls from grace. And their stories, they don't end with a quiet retirement. No way. They both ultimately brought foreign enemy armies right back to their own city gates. It's an incredibly wild piece of history, so let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this because this question right here is Plutarch's central paradox, and it's really the engine driving our entire explainer today. Throughout these two lives, we are looking at some seriously timeless questions about human psychology and leadership. Primarily, how exactly does a brilliant man just go wrong? And perhaps even more uncomfortably, when a city mistreats its most brilliant citizens, does that mistreatment ever actually justify treason? So keep this question in the back of your mind as we sift through the evidence. So, let's meet our main guys. On one side, we have Alcibiades, easily the most spectacular Athenian of the late 5th century BC. He was a ward of Pericles, rich, incredibly good-looking, and politically unmatched. And then on the other side is Coriolanus, an early Republic Roman patrician general, completely legendary for single-handedly seizing the enemy city of Corioli. Now, what Plutarch wants us to see here is that while the texture of their careers is totally different, the intellectual, flashy Athenian versus the blunt, tough-as-nails Roman, the actual shape of their careers is identical. They were both unusually gifted, they both rose to extreme prominence, they were both exiled by their own people, and they both became legendary traitors.
Moving into Section 1, the seeds of character. Plutarch was an absolute master at looking at childhood to explain the adult. He firmly believed that if you want to understand how a man could literally burn his own city down, well, you have to look at the formative incidents of his youth. Take this brilliant little exchange from a childhood wrestling match involving Alcibiades. Young Alcibiades is losing the match, so to avoid being thrown, he just bites down hard on his opponent's arms. The other boy yells, "You bite like a woman," and Alcibiades instantly fires back, "No, like a lion." It's a funny anecdote, right? But it shows us exactly who Alcibiades is early on. He's arrogant, wildly competitive, totally willing to bend the rules to avoid losing at any cost, and his wit is just sharp as a tack.
Now flip that over and contrast that flashy Athenian wit with our Roman. Coriolanus didn't really have that same rhetorical flair. Instead, Plutarch tells us that Coriolanus' life was defined by one ascetic, fiercely formative bond: his deep, completely unyielding devotion to his mother, Volmenia. He was raised by her, he went to war partly just to make her proud, and this incredibly intense, singular familial loyalty became the absolute core of his being. And, as you'll see a bit later, it's pretty much the only thing that could actually stop him.
All right, Section 2, Two Styles of Contempt.
Now, what's really interesting about this is that while both men possessed rare native gifts, they shared a massive problem: dealing with the general public. Quite frankly, they both despised the masses. But they showed it in completely opposite ways. Alcibiades, he flattered the people. He played games with them, manipulating their emotions to get his massive projects approved, all while privately looking down on them. It's this very calculated, slick political disdain. Coriolanus is the exact opposite. He despised the public openly. He was a stubborn patrician who literally refused to canvass or lower himself to ask the plebs for their votes, even when he was running for the highest office of consul. Plutarch weighs these two styles of contempt heavily, really setting the stage for their imminent downfalls.
Bringing us to Section 3, the turning point.
These turning points are the dramatic, high-stakes catalysts that triggered their exiles. We're going to look at the exact moments the public turned on both of these men and how rapidly the whole thing fell apart. For Alcibiades, the turning point was the Sicilian expedition in 415 BC. This was his baby, his brainchild. He used all that manipulative charm we just talked about to persuade the Athenians to launch the largest Greek military undertaking ever attempted. It was a massive naval and land strike against Syracuse, way out in Sicily. The logistical demands were enormous, the strategic case was highly speculative, and the political risks, absolutely astronomical. But he got the Athenians to vote yes, and he gambled the entire house on it.
Let's walk through this timeline, because you have to see how fast it all went wrong. First, Alcibiades sails for Sicily. But right before he left, someone vandalized the sacred statues in Athens, known as the Herms. While Alcibiades is out at sea, his political enemies pounce. They accuse him of the sacrilege, delay any kind of fair trial, and engineer a conviction and a death sentence in absentia. When Alcibiades gets the news out in Sicily, does he go home to face the music? Nope.
Step 4. He defects to Sparta, Athens' absolute greatest enemy.
Meanwhile, Coriolanus faces his own crisis, completely different in nature. A severe famine strikes Rome. The plebeians are literally starving. Then, suddenly, ships of grain arrive from Sicily. In the Senate, Coriolanus sees an opportunity. He demands that the grain only be distributed at the old high prices and only if the plebeians give up their recently won political rights. He essentially tries to use mass starvation as political leverage. Actually, scratch that. It was an ultimatum. The reaction is predictably explosive. The plebs threaten to murder him in the streets, he refuses to attend a public trial, and boom, he too is condemned to exile in absentia.
Which leads perfectly into Section 4, Exile and Vengeance.
So, historically, some men accepted exile gracefully, with patience. Not these two. When their political communities turned on them, Alcibiades and Coriolanus reacted in kind with devastating active vengeance. So, the crucial point is, when Alcibiades went to Sparta, he perfectly targeted his revenge. He literally handed them the strategic keys to destroying his own city. He told them to send Spartan generals to Syracuse, which completely annihilated the very Sicilian expedition he had created. He told them to build a permanent base at Decelea right inside Athenian territory, which just bled Athens dry. And he told them to spark revolts among Athenian allies. Plutarch handles this betrayal with a cool detachment, but make no mistake, Alcibiades systematically dismantled the Athenian empire.
And Coriolanus' retaliation? Just as swift and just as brutal. He defected to the Volscians, which is crazy because those were the very people he had famously defeated earlier in his life. He took command of their military, and within a single year he had marched a foreign enemy army right to the gates of his own home city, ready to burn Rome to the ground.
Okay, Section 5, the moral counterweights.
So both of these incredible cities are teetering on the brink of absolute destruction at the hands of their own exiled sons. But Plutarch shows us that even these untamable, vengeful men had a moral architecture. When we compare the two, we see that for Alcibiades, his moral anchor was philosophical. It was Socrates. Socrates had actually saved his life in battle, and he was quite literally the only man Alcibiades actually respected. It's like the one bright light in his deeply conflicted life. For Coriolanus, the anchor wasn't philosophical, it was intensely familial. It was Volmunia, his mother. And it is this specific relationship that alters the course of Roman history.
And this brilliantly illustrates the power of that familial bond. While Coriolanus is poised to sack Rome, Volumnia walks out to the enemy camp and confronts her son at the gates. She delivers a speech so powerful, so filled with maternal authority, that she single-handedly talks him out of destroying the city. This moment is so dramatic and so perfectly captured by Plutarch that when William Shakespeare wrote his tragedy Coriolanus centuries later, he drew this exact scene almost verbatim from Plutarch's text. It's just incredible.
Finally, Section 6, Justified Treason.
In the end, neither man gets a happy ending. Coriolanus is murdered by the Volscians, who were furious over his retreat at the gates. Alcibiades is briefly recalled to Athens, serves brilliantly again, falls from favor again, and ultimately dies violently in foreign exile. So we end where we began, with the profound question Plutarch leaves hanging over both of these lives. When does a city's mistreatment of a brilliant person justify their betrayal of that city? Were the rigged trials and the patrician arrogance of Rome enough to excuse treason? Or does true brilliance require enduring injustice without turning against your home? It's a timeless analysis of human psychology, power, and loyalty. I hope this explainer has given you a fresh perspective on this incredible slice of history and leaves you eager to dig even deeper into the source material. Thanks so much for learning with me today.